Today, we're stepping into the courtroom for one of the most complex and deeply personal ethical debates out there, euthanasia. We're going to examine the evidence, we'll hear the arguments, and really weigh the principles that get to the very heart of how we think about life, death, and personal choice. So, let's get started. The word euthanasia itself literally means a good death. But the question at its core is anything but simple. Is helping someone end their suffering an act of compassion, maybe the ultimate kindness? Or is it a line that society should just never, ever cross? That's the fundamental dilemma we're diving into. To really get a grip on this, we can't just talk in abstracts. And honestly, there's no more powerful, real-world example than the case of Tony Bland. After the Hillsborough Stadium disaster, he was left with zero chance of recovery. His parents then faced this absolutely agonizing legal battle. Their goal wasn't to actively end his life, but to get permission to stop the medical treatment that was artificially keeping his body going. His case forced an entire nation to face these questions head-on, and it really sets the stage for our trial today. Okay, first up, let's hear the case for changing the law. This is the side that argues for personal choice and for compassion when someone is facing unbearable suffering. So the absolute cornerstone of this argument is the idea of quality of life. This perspective suggests that life isn't just about having a heartbeat. It's about what actually makes that life feel worth living. It shifts the focus away from just the biological fact of being alive to the experience of that life. It really challenges us to ask a tough question. Is a life without consciousness, or one that's just filled with constant, inescapable pain, truly a life of value? Wow. Situation ethicist Joseph Fletcher put this compassionate argument into such sharp focus with this powerful quote. He's basically arguing that forcing someone to endure a dehumanizing end is, in itself, a moral problem. From his point of view, the most loving thing you could do might just be to help them find peace. And this story just perfectly illustrates that quality of life isn't only about physical pain. Fletcher tells the story of Jim, a terminally ill man whose choice was just agonizingly complicated. If he took the pills to live longer, it would financially destroy the family he loves so much. But if he refused them, he'd secure their future, which meant choosing to die sooner. I mean, what does quality of life even mean when it's so tangled up with the well-being of the people you love? Now, let's move to the second pillar of this case, autonomy. This is that fundamental idea of self-determination, the belief that we are the authors of our own lives and that we should have a say in our final chapter too. The tragic story of Daniel James makes this idea of autonomy incredibly real. He was this promising athlete, and after a paralyzing injury, he found his new reality just unbearable. For him, the decision was all about control. It was about refusing to live a life that he felt wasn't his own anymore. His parents respected his wishes, which really highlights that profound belief that, at the end of the day, it was his life and his decision to make. Okay, so we've heard from one side. Now let's hear the case from the defense. This argument is all about preserving the current laws, and it's based on a profoundly different idea, the sanctity of life. At the very core of the defense is this concept of the sanctity of life. This perspective says that life has an intrinsic, sacred value, completely separate from its quality or our personal experiences of it. It's not something we own or control. It's a gift, and its value is absolute, from the very first moment to the very last natural breath. And this principle has some seriously deep roots in theological and philosophical traditions. You see it in Genesis, saying we're made in God's image, in the commandment not to murder, and in the belief that the timing of life and death is up to God, not us. Philosophically, natural law theory also says that preserving innocent life is a primary, fundamental good. Now, what's really fascinating here is how this table just lays the central clash bare. The defense argues that the sanctity of life upholds the value of all life and, crucially, protects the most vulnerable people from harm. But the counterargument says, well, that's a religious idea that doesn't really fit in a secular society, that it totally overrides personal autonomy, and that it can cruelly lead to prolonging suffering against a person's wishes. A huge piece of evidence for the defense is the slippery slope argument. The fear is this: if we allow euthanasia in some cases, where do we draw the line? Where does it stop? Could it create a society where the elderly, the disabled, or the chronically ill start to feel pressured, either from the outside or just from within, to end their lives because they feel like a burden? It's a major concern about unintended consequences. Okay, before we get to the closing arguments, the court needs to look at one more crucial piece of philosophical evidence, and this one really challenges that clean line between killing and letting die.
So traditionally, we make a big distinction between active and passive euthanasia. Active is a direct action to end a life, like a lethal injection. Passive is an omission. It's withholding treatment, like removing Tony Bland's feeding tube. One is generally considered illegal and immoral, while the other might be permissible in certain situations. But the question is that distinction really as meaningful as we think it is?
So let's check out this thought experiment from the philosopher James Rachels. In case number 1, we have Smith. He stands to inherit a fortune, so he actively drowns his young nephew in the bathtub. It's a clear, direct act of killing.
Now let's look at Jones. He has the exact same motive. He walks into the bathroom and finds his nephew has accidentally slipped, hit his head, and is drowning. Jones just stands there and watches. He doesn't act. He simply lets the boy die.
And here's the big question for the jury. For you, is Jones really any less blameworthy than Smith? Rachels would argue absolutely not. The motive was the same and the outcome was the same. This little thought experiment is so powerful because it totally challenges the idea that there's some huge moral canyon between an act and an omission. And that really complicates this whole debate. The evidence has been presented. The witnesses have testified through their stories. So it's time to summarize the cases one last time before you, the jury, have to deliver your verdict. At the end of the day, it really all comes down to this. On one side, you have the case for choice, built on quality of life, personal autonomy, and compassion. It argues that a humane society should allow people the right to choose a good death. And on the other side, you have the case for sanctity, built on the intrinsic value of all life and the duty to protect the vulnerable. It argues that life is sacred and simply not ours to take. Both sides have made some incredibly compelling arguments, haven't they? One appeals to our sense of individual freedom and our empathy. The other appeals to our sense of universal duty and the absolute value of life itself. There is no easy answer here. So now it's up to you. After hearing all the evidence, what is your verdict?